welcome to today's episode of The Startups. So guys, guess what? Today marks the 10th episode that we've been running The Startups now, and it's been really, really amazing. And as a special treat to mark the landmark, we are going to be doing a bit of a special episode and focusing on leading women in business to inspire the next generation of female and women leaders. So with me on the call today is Vicky Bradley and Sophie Ballo. They are inspiring women leaders in their own right. Vicky has been holding senior leadership positions for a very long time now. She's had diverse senior leadership experiences, and she is currently leading the Will Empowered Foundation, which is a foundation focused on inspiring women leaders. So this is right up our street. And Sophie is the rising star. Sophie is ex-McKinsey. She's also served as the chief of staff to a CEO for one of the fastest growing startups in the world. So she's really doing great things herself, and that's really, really inspiring. So I'd like to bring them on now. Hi, Vicky. Hi, Sophie. How are you guys doing?
Great. Good day.
Indeed. By the way, guys, Vicky is calling all the way from Canada, and I believe that Sophie is based in the UK. Is that correct, Sophie?
That's correct. Yeah, I'm in Edinburgh today actually, because I've just started a new project working on the COVID vaccine up here. So that's why I'm in Scotland.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really, really amazing. So guys, just before we go into the weeds of today's discussion, do you mind just kind of telling me what your inspirations are? What are the people that you follow, and what has made you, or what factors have contributed to who you are today? I don't know if you want to go with Sophie.
Great, yeah, happy to start. I was going to invite Vicky to the floor, but I'll take it. So my inspirations. I have been very lucky. I was at the University of Exeter, and during my time there, I actually joined a not-for-profit called Upreach, who are a charity who are passionate about improving social mobility. So they identify students who are high achieving but come from disadvantaged backgrounds. And, you know, being introduced to that program gave me exposure to a program that was designed to, you know, break down those barriers that stood for, you know, students like me, right? Not necessarily, like, we'll come on to gender later, not necessarily because of my gender, but because of the fact that I hadn't had parents or family who'd worked in city jobs. You know, they broke down what it meant to be a consultant for me, broke down what it meant to be a lawyer, and it gave me the confidence really to apply for the jobs that I did. So that's kind of where my inspiration started. That's where my passion for diversity started. I went to McKinsey shortly after that. So shortly after finishing my my degree in economics. And as a BA, you know, I was again quite lucky, especially, you know, if I'm going to touch on the gender point there, you know, McKinsey is one of the pioneering firms around diversity and inclusion. So I was really lucky. I was in a cohort that was 60% women. The company, you know, all of its BAs are 50%, and it has been for a very long time. So was very lucky. I then went on to become Chief of Staff to Dame Vivian Hunt, who was the managing partner for the UK and Ireland of McKinsey at the time. And when you talk about role models, when you talk about inspiration, who better than Dame Vivian Hunt, right? The you know, the pioneer around their research that delivering through diversity matters 1 and 2. So that was amazing, and that's where most of my lessons came from, really, from her, you know. And I'm sure we'll touch on a lot of that later. But small bits of advice that she gave me around not being the person in the room who offers everyone coffee, to, you know, making sure I sit with her at the table even when I don't necessarily have anything to say. You know, all of that was very important, and helped sort of bring me up as well. So yeah, I went on from that Chief of Staff role to another Chief of Staff role for, as you touched on it earlier, the CEO of a very fast growing tech startup in London. And I did that for 12-13 months before taking on another consultancy project on the COVID vaccine, because it felt like the right thing to do, the right thing to help out. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit about my story, a little bit about my inspiration. I'll pause there and give the floor to Vicky.
Amazing. Thank you, Sophie. Go for it, Vicky.
Okay. Well, wow, Sophie, that's great. You've got the background. And I love, love what you said about, she invited you to the table with her, not expecting you to be the person on the sideline, taking orders or notes or coffee or whatever that might be. So well done. We all need to have those mentors. And people who sponsor us to help us, to rise to what we can and are capable of doing. So thank you for having me on the call this morning, or this afternoon, I guess, in London. So I spent, as you said, years in retail as a senior executive, most of the time as the only female in the room. And that didn't intimidate me, but what I realized through my 25 plus years in those executive roles is how many women were intimidated by it. And so that inspired me to be able to help more women find their voice, find their confidence, and really just to rise to the potential that they're here for, because each of us have our own gifts. And, I believe that every single person on this earth, whether it be man or woman, we have our own gifts, and we need to be able to express that in a way that makes a better world. So that inspires me daily. I love, Brene Brown. I love Marianne Williamson, but I also love Jack Welch and, the people who have really shaped our the way that we do things. So part of the reason I left the retail industry as an executive is I actually got very sick, and I had to take a step back and say, what's not working in my life? And, it was tough because it was debilitating and I had 2 young children, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it helped me to actually go inside and figure out, what is my purpose? What am I here for? And how do I inspire others to, really be fully and authentically who they are? And so I decided to go on my own. I became an executive coach. So I got certified, went back to school. And then one of my projects, kind of like Sophie, a project that I'm working on with a tech company, that sort of was the precursor of the big launch of Women in Leadership Empowered, because I was in this, global organization that wanted me to work with their high potential females. And when I brought them together, what we saw was the power of the community and the networking and the peer-to-peer mentoring, and how important it was to support each other, to, take a risk and to be fearless. And that self-doubt is normal, but how do we inspire that in each other and continue to really excel? So that's kind of that's who I am, and that's what's inspired me. And every day I try to talk to as many people as I can globally, because I believe that that's how we make a better world and really be at the potential we have.
Indeed. I mean, before we go any further, I think I just have to throw a bit of a disclaimer out there, because I'm sure a lot of people might be wondering, what interest does a guy have facilitating a conversation about leading women in business or leading women in general? First of all, I have a very, very selfish, like I said to Vicky when we spoke some weeks ago, I have a very selfish reason and a very selfish motive for doing this. And my reason is because I'm surrounded by women. I have a wife, I have a daughter, and I have a sister, and all of whom I want to do well. So that's my selfish reason. So, and I feel like there are many women all around the world, like Sophie mentioned, like you've mentioned, like Vicky has mentioned as well, where they are just looking for an opportunity to rise to what they feel is inside them. There are a lot of women all over the world that are looking for a Dame Vivian Hunt or a Vicky Bradley to believe in them, to kind of say to them that, yes, you actually have something to give. And I was listening to an interview that Dame Vivian Hunt actually led with Hillary Clinton and Cherie Blair. And one of the things that came out is that sometimes when I think Cherie Blair was mentioning that whenever she has a male staff and she gives the male staff a promotion, that male staff is always like, as in, like, why didn't this come any sooner, right? But when it comes to the female staff is wondering, that, can I really do this? Am I sure I'll be able to deliver? So guys, is this something that you've seen in your experience or in your interaction with women as well, when they are faced with opportunity, the ability to believe, the self-belief aspect of things? Is that some of the things that you've seen?
Absolutely. I mean, Sophie, it's okay. I'll speak up to that. Definitely. I mean, I coach a lot in very senior women. I will coach a lot on how to, take that promotion or listen to what that opportunity is and know that you are worthy of that. And, I'll give you an example. I had a client, she was a vice president of marketing for a large organization here in Canada. And her company came to her and said, we would like you to interview for this role. And it was to be the head basically of risk management. So she would have been the SVP of risk management. And she looked at the person from the human resources and said, why would you want me? I'm not qualified. And of course, I'm like, why would you say that? And to your point, she went to the guy that was the next candidate, and he was not even 50% qualified for the role compared to the female. And he was like, absolutely, right? Like there was no hesitation. And so when I coached my client on this, I said, why would you think you're not capable or worthy of that role? And she was like, well, because I've never done risk management. And I said, no, but you were head of marketing for this organization for how many years? You were head of technology for this organization for how many years? Who would be better qualified than you, because you have a very holistic view of the organization.
Yes.
And what happens internally, it is that self-doubt. And we're taught as young women to, play nice, to, we don't have an ego, and we need to be feminine, and we need to be all these things. And you can still be all that and have your value, have your worth, and take on those roles. And so one of the things that, I really try to reiterate with my clients is feel that fear and do it anyway. What is the worst case? Like, so what if you fail? That's okay. Thomas Edison failed 10,000 times before he invented, the light bulb. So it's having the courage to go for what you want. And it is believing in yourself. And sometimes you need an ally. You need somebody like a Sophie or a Vicky who is pushing you to say, yes, of course you can do this. This is what you're meant to do. So sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, but I get so passionate about this because I see women pass up opportunities that were made for them. And it's just that self-doubt. It's that little voice that says, not sure. And we need that little push to say, yes, do it. It's okay if you fail.
Exactly. Because I've also seen that even with my wife, with my sister as well. Sometimes, you see that hesitation, and they need that voice to say, come on, you have the skills. Even though you feel like you don't have the direct related skills in there, you actually have transferable skills that could help, that could even make you a better candidate than someone that you feel is actually qualified for that role. And I don't know if you can also speak on it, Sophie, because I know when I was actually preparing for this program, I spoke to a female entrepreneur. She actually manages a chain of several businesses, and she's very, very young. And one of the things she mentioned to me that was a challenge for her starting was that she had actually started a long time ago, but she was not confident in her work. She found it very, very challenging to put her work out there. So she was kind of doing everything, maybe with her friends or people in her immediate sphere of contact. So Sophie, I don't know if you can speak to this. Well, what are the attributes that a woman or female leader can actually develop in order for them to be confident to put their work out there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree. And just to, respond to something Vicky said there, right, about the worst thing that can happen. I'm a huge advocate of that. I remember, back at university when, Outreach just first even suggested me considering a career with McKinsey. And I was like, absolutely no, shut them down. I was like, no way. And their response was, but why? What's the worst thing that can happen if you put that application in? What's the word? And I was like, okay, let's put an application in. And then I got through to the first round of interviews and the second round of interviews. And I was like, I'll never get through to I'll never get around to that next step. And I was offered a job. And I think actually me taking that one risk and doing that application, getting that job, made such a difference in how I've approached opportunities after that. Right, it's given me that kind of what's the worst thing that can happen type of perspective, and it's also the advice that I pass on to others. And I think about in terms of traits, you know, what I've seen make the women that I've worked for and worked with successful is the ones that have realized that, you know, they don't need to mirror the characteristics of the male leaders that have historically above them. It's the ones that have stepped back and been like, actually, I don't need to be the voice that's always right. I don't need to be the person who's speaking. Sometimes the right thing for me to do is to sit back and let my team do their jobs and do their jobs well. Sometimes it's my job to just ask the right questions, to be in the right place at the right time and put other people forward for those opportunities. And, you know, I hate to gender stereotype in any way, but that's definitely just a trait that I've seen more in the female leaders I've worked with than in the male ones, who will tend to be the main voice at that table. So I think I completely agree with Vicky in terms of just going for opportunities, putting yourself forward like you would, you know, encourage a friend to go for something. And then the other one is not necessarily feeling like you need to lean in, right? Like, I mean, it's a really controversial book, you know, the Sheryl Sandberg sort of lean in, but why lean in if we haven't got something to lean in about? Like, why not support others in leaning in? Because that is something that is inherently sort of more female characteristic and something that can also make us just as successful. So that would just be my perspective on the topic.
Amazing. I think it's always having that balance, right? So one of the things that I feel that females are generally very, very good at is the EQ. They have very high emotional quotient. They have a greater ability to read a room and to actually connect to people on an emotional level and actually bring out the best in people. But what advice would you have with a female leader that feels like, I need to be masculine in order for me? I know you've already touched on this, but they still feel that I need to be masculine because of all the idea they have about a leadership is a masculine authority. What advice would you have on that?
Vicky, do you want to go first?
Sure. I would say that my first response would be, you're actually doing a disservice to yourself and to others when you pretend to be one of the suits or one of the boys. Part of the beauty of women is we actually take this holistic approach. And Sophie mentioned this, like women, we will ask the questions, we will get everyone involved, because it's not about us winning, it's about all of us winning, right? Yeah. And so when we come across with that strong masculine, and I'll be honest with you, when I started my career, I was that person, because I was the only female in the room a lot of times. And so sometimes I would have to become very assertive and aggressive to get the point across. But what I've learned through all those years of that experience is that all that does is it gets people on the defense, right? And so it's how you communicate. And sometimes when those voices get higher and higher in the room, it's the softer you get, the more attentive people become and the better that they listen. So it's really being who you are authentically and not trying to be somebody else, because you will show up as yourself eventually. It's like when I'm coaching people on, career changes and they're interviewing, it's like, okay, be who you are, because eventually that's how you're going to show up in that organization. And then they're going to say, wait a minute, that's not who I interviewed. So if they don't accept you for who you are, then maybe you change the circumstances of where you are. But from my perspective, it truly is, just know who you are and really tap into what those strengths are. And so you mentioned the emotional intelligence. And on an average, I would say women are much more emotionally intelligent, but it's what you do with that. It's really tapping into what your strengths are in emotional intelligence and utilizing that to help you navigate, different situations.
Amazing, amazing. I mean, I like what somebody, a lecturer from Harvard said about leadership. He said leadership is about knowing who you are and being who you are. So but in terms of one of the things that I've also witnessed is in terms of self-finding, being able to identify who you really are, in terms of that soul searching to know who your true self really is. what strategies or what kind of factors would you provide to an aspiring a female leader who is looking? I don't really think I know myself very well. I don't really think I actually know what my strengths are, talk less of what my weaknesses are. What guidance would you give them to be able to actually start digging these things out and being their true self?
Okay, Sophie, do you wanna lead this?
Yeah, I'll take a stab. So, I mean, I was very lucky. What McKinsey drills into all of its business analysts is a feedback culture, right? Like, one thing that happens to me whenever I finish a project or finish a pitch or a presentation is I ask for feedback. And through that feedback, whether it was at McKinsey or in any of the roles that came after, is it very quickly started to identify areas of strength for me and also my blind spots, right? I think my advice for people who are trying to work out actually what am I good at, what are the strengths that I can leverage, that I can develop so I can continue this sort of trajectory, is ask for feedback. But it's kind of like a double-edged sword, right? Like, my advice would be, don't think that you need to believe and act on every piece of feedback, right? Because I think actually when you take all feedback too seriously, is that sometimes it can become quite depressing. I've had feedback from men and women that I believe I wouldn't have had if I was a man. I've had feedback that my pitch is too high. I've had feedback that sometimes I can sound like I'm complaining. Sometimes, if I don't speak enough, then should I be sitting at the table? If I do speak, I'm speaking out of my place. I'm speaking out of, I've had feedback that's been really helpful and feedback that's not been helpful. So I think ask for it, because feedback genuinely is a gift. But also just bear in mind that not everyone's trained in actually giving good or unbiased feedback.
Yeah, I think on that, Sophie, one of the things that I personally have struggled with, I don't think it is a female-based thing, is knowing the difference between asking for feedback and seeking validation. How do you distinguish from the two?
No, it's an important one. So I've actually had feedback that sometimes I need validation too much as well. So maybe the wrong person to ask. But no, I think that when I ask for feedback, and whenever I start a chief of staff role, right, because it's so important that you've got that connection with the CEO, is to say, when we have these feedback conversations, I don't just want to hear these are the things that I'm doing well, these are the things to keep doing. Actually, what's more important to me is these are the things that you can do to excel further. These are the things that I think you could do to have done that slightly better, to have taken more perspectives into account, to become a better rounded leader or individual. I actually, emphasize to the person I'm asking for feedback that that's the type of stuff I'm looking for. And, I'll often actually lead with, I'll give them feedback first. And there'll always be something that I think, that they did really well there that I feel like I'm learning from, but also something that I actually felt maybe they could have done better, or something they could look into doing differently next time. And I think that just sort of sets the scene to say, this isn't me looking for recognition, actually, because I'm quite secure in the job that I did, and I know in myself what I might do differently next time. This is me looking for something else, because this is about my development. And I think just setting the tone of that conversation very differently can be helpful.
That's amazing.
Can I just expand on that for a minute? Because Sophie brought up a lot of really great points. So first of all, good for you, because you're extremely self-aware and you already know what you're doing well, but it's how do you expand on that, and you're open to it. And sometimes what I find is people get defensive because they feel like somebody's being critical of them. And so it's a mind shift that we need to have, right? And Sophie, it sounds like you're doing that beautifully, because you're open to hearing, and you can filter where that feedback is coming from and how do you utilize that feedback to your best advantage, right? So thank you for sharing that. The other thing I would say is sometimes, and you've mentioned this, you have to be careful who you're asking the feedback from, because they will have biases. They will have ulterior motives. And so again, you have to be able to filter what's being said. So because I am a coach, of course, I'm going to say hire a coach. Because a coach is an objective party, and they will see you very differently and help you be able to be your own validation, which it sounds like, again, Sophie's doing. But the other thing I would say is finding mentors that may not always be within your organization, but people who are external that, have already been in your shoes, let's say, that you can tap into to, you know, bounce ideas off of and to learn from, because we're one person and we can't know everything that is needed to know. And so the more you can tap in and be curious, the more you can grow yourself. So sorry, I just wanted to add that because I thought you brought up really great points.
And that's amazing. And just to touch on something you just said there, Vicky, about mentorship. So in terms of finding a mentor, what criteria should you be looking for? How should you approach it? Because you mentioned about not finding a mentor necessarily in your organization, which is good, because that is when you actually be able to get a very balanced review and not a biased review, because that person will only mentor you based on what you guys are trying to achieve together within the scope of that organization. But in terms of how do you do it, is mentorship always accidental, or can it also be intentional?
Oh, it can be both. And mentors can come in lots of different shapes and sizes, right? So one thing that I'm a huge proponent of, and I think you are as well, is connecting, right? So it's, you know, you start out with connecting with people and building relationships, not necessarily having an ulterior motive, but it is having genuine connections. And usually that is when you find your mentors, right? Because you'll have a conversation with somebody, and as you get to know them, something will spark in that discussion where you go, wow, like, can we talk more about that? And because it's something that you're interested in and that you want to learn more about, and that person can guide you in a way that it's very organic, right? And so it goes back to the mind shift. It's being open to, you know, what is it you want to learn, and who can you tap into that has that skill set? And it might be something totally out of your wheelhouse, but it's being curious and being open to hearing and to learning. And mentors, like I said, they come in all different shapes and sizes. You'll meet people, like I'll share this with you. One of my dearest friends I met in the hospital. And it was one of those fluke things. I would have never met her. And she's been my best friend now for the last 16 years. And this is a woman who owns 5 businesses. They're all very different, but I tap into her for different things, and we've become very close. And it was just one of those, she's in one hospital bed, I'm in the other, and it just happened organically. So I guess what I would say to you is, you know, that old saying, like my mom used to say, never judge a book by its cover, because you can learn something from everyone. And sometimes I think what we do is we have this mindset that we always have to be the teacher, right? But the teacher is also the student. And so if you can think about what's that exchange, because not only are you gaining insight from somebody, but you're also sharing your own experiences, which can help them learn. So that would be my advice, and do it often. Like, a lot of people are fearful of networking, connecting, and the way I teach a lot of people how to network, and it's really about treat people the way you want to be treated. You always have something interesting to share, right? And I'm going to say something that Sophie said earlier that I am a huge proponent of, is ask great questions. Just get curious and ask lots of great questions. And it'll be amazing where the story can go.
Amazing. And to be honest with you, one of the things that differentiates between a good leader and a bad leader is not necessarily the one that has all the answers, but the one who knows how to ask the right questions, right? Because one of the things I've learned in my own little experience of leadership is that a leader is not somebody who needs to have all the answers, but knows how to bring out the answers from the right people. So I think, Sophie, I'd like you to also touch on the mentorship aspect of things. So in terms of finding your mentors, in terms of listening to your mentors, or actually going through the mentorship process, what has actually worked for you and what hasn't worked for you?
Yeah, and it's the age-old question of mentorship. It comes up at every networking event that you go to. How do we form these relationships? And I think the most helpful pieces of advice I ever had was differentiate between sponsors and mentors, right? So differentiate between your sponsors that probably are more likely to be in the company that you're trying to progress within. These are the people who are actively pulling you up, but usually it's a two-way relationship. So, you know, for example, I might have a sponsor who's a senior partner at McKinsey. I might be there helping them with proposals, but you know, that naturally means I'm spending time with them, I'm learning from them as I'm doing that, and then they're more likely to recommend me for projects, or you know, pull me into projects in the future, right? Because they develop that relationship. So you know, that there's sponsors like that, and then there's mentors, and mentors, like you know, Vicky was saying, can develop organically, or you have to work a little bit harder. And I think there the big click for me was never like judge a book by its cover too soon. Never meet somebody and think, oh, actually they're not like me, I don't think we could develop a good relationship. Go for that coffee, have that conversation, ask the questions, and see where that relationship goes. And don't be scared of having to work for a mentorship relationship either. I think a lot of young women now who come to me and ask for advice with mentorship is they say, oh, you know, how do I have that first conversation? And I'm like, well, prepare for that first conversation like you would a job interview. Maybe think about, what do you want to get out of it? What do you think you can learn from this person? Because quite often, especially I think when it comes to female mentorship, is there's fewer females in senior leadership positions, right? Unfortunately, that still is the case. So if every young woman in that organization goes to those senior women for mentorship, it becomes so hard for them, and they want to do it. I so believe that they want to do it. They want to have a coffee. They want to be as helpful as possible. But if you don't go to those conversations prepared, they're not going to have done that preparation for you. They're not going to come with this list of, let me ask these questions, how can I help you? You're going to need to drive that conversation. You're going to need to speak to their EA and schedule those sessions out in the future to make sure you maintain that relationship. You're going to have to work hard, right, at that relationship. So that's probably number two. And then number three would be, to Vicky's point about diversifying that mentorship community that sits around you. So actually don't just go to women and ask them to be your mentor, or try and develop those relationships. Some of the most helpful pieces of advice that I've had have come from men. So an example of an organic one was, I was on a flight actually to Edinburgh about a year ago, and I ended up sat next to a senior member of a pharmaceutical board. He sat on the C-suite, and you know, it was that relationship. We stayed in touch, we shared advice that actually led to me getting the job that I'm doing now. Like, that was a conversation on an airplane just about the thing that we both found interesting. And he's, you know, been so helpful in my professional development up until this point, to now to the point that he's actually providing me with a job opportunity, right? So that's an organic one. And then inorganically, a senior partner at McKinsey, I went to him, I asked very explicitly, I said, I'm looking to diversify my mentorship community. There's a couple of traits that I've seen in how he leads that I find particularly interesting. I would like to learn from him, and I would like to strengthen my leadership style. So, you know, that's one I have to work a little bit harder at. But even now, I've been out of McKinsey for over a year. We meet every couple of months and we give each other advice. It's kind of like reverse mentorship as well. So yeah, I think that's probably, you know, just understand the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. Ask yourself, what relationship is it that I want to have with this person? Prepare and be prepared to work hard, and then diversify your mentorship community. That would be my advice.
Amazing. Now, another thing that comes to mind here when it comes to rising female leadership is that is the case of balance, right? So sometimes I can imagine females thinking that I can only have either or, I can't have both. So especially when a female gets married and are looking to start a family, they are wondering, the corporate culture does not seem to take kindly to women who are looking to start their own family. So I don't know what your experiences have been around that, and what advice would you have for a female who is having that as a barrier in their mind? Sophie or Vicky, whoever wants to go first. But I would like both of you to actually touch on this, because I think you guys can speak on it at different spectrum. Sophie, I don't know if you're looking into that line yet. Vicky, I'm not sure, but I think both of you can share different spectrum of experiences. So
sure.
whoever wants to go
first.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sophie. Do you want to go first?
Oh, I'm going first. Okay. Yes, I mean, I would probably share my perspective on that is from my experience of working for senior women and seeing how they do it, right? Because all of the senior women I worked for have got at least 2 children. And actually what I've learned from that is the art of delegation. And I think delegation is something that doesn't come as naturally to women as it comes to men, whether that's delegating at work or whether that's delegating at home. I think we have more of a tendency, because of historical obligations, to feel like we need to be Wonder Woman, to feel like we need to do everything and we need to do everything well, to feel like we need to have something that's called balance, right? Like, what is that? And I think actually, the most successful senior women I've seen is the ones who know what's important to them and can draw the line. So an example being, a senior woman I worked with recently, she had a rule that she was with her kids 2 nights a week for dinner time onto bedtime, and then a couple of hours, she'd log on for a couple of hours after bedtime, right? That was her solid line. But equally, she helped. She delegated around the house to her husband. She delegated at work to her team, and she trusted them. And I think that meant that she could do all of those things, and that she could have the confidence to draw the line when actually, she needed to step away from work and be at home and go to the gym. It's not just about like work and home. It's actually about, we're still individuals, we're still humans with hobbies and interests and needs outside of those 2 spheres. So yeah, I think the one thing I've taken away from the senior women I've worked with is having the confidence to draw your line wherever that may be, and being able, being confident in delegating as well.
Amazing.
Well said. So I was one of those women and still am, actually. So I have 2 children, and I was a president of Bombay Company when I had my first child. And I went back to work after 5 weeks of having him.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I was in the US at that time. It's very different now, because I had my second child, I was working in Canada. And so I took 7 months. So it was a little bit better. But a couple of things you said there, Sophie, are so bang on. And I have a lot of particularly younger women starting in their career saying, oh, I just got married, I want to have a family, but I'm on this career trajectory. I can't do both. Everybody's telling me it's not possible. And so how I approach that is, anything is possible. It's all in how you orchestrate it. So Sophie brought up some great points. It's about having boundaries. It's about how you delegate. So it's making sure you have a great team around you so that you can do those things. And usually that great team also has a family. So it's give and take, right? But I would say that, the other big thing is your support system around you, whether, because let's face it, a lot of women are not getting married now and they're having children. And so it's, how do you raise a child and have a great career? And you're going to have a career because you got to keep a roof over your head and you're raising a child. So it is about making choices that are comfortable for you, whether that's having a family member who moves in and helps you to raise your child. Because, having a village raise a child is better than just one person. So it's changing some of those perceptions that we've had, or it's hiring support. It's having a nanny that's there with you, and it's finding that the balance and balance not being 50-50, but the balance, and so that you are able to take self-care. And Sophie mentioned this, whether it's exercise or meditation or even just sitting and reading a book. We take on so much responsibility with our homes and our careers. It is absolutely critical that we carve out time for ourselves, because we've got to be able to fuel ourselves. Otherwise we get depleted. And if we're depleted, what happens to everybody else? Professionally, everybody's like, oh, Vicky's struggling here, or at home, wow, she's just not herself. And so putting yourself first, and I love that example the airlines use about, you put the oxygen mask on yourself first, then you help the person beside you. That is so true in every aspect of life, because when we're not fueling ourselves, we are not good for anybody else. Is it possible to have both career and family? Absolutely. You see women doing it all the time, but it does take a great partner and it takes a great support system. So it's finding the ways that make that work. And I just want to expand a little bit, because what happens to a lot of women is that they feel the guilt. It's the guilt. If I'm letting somebody else help me raise my children, I must not be a good mother. And that is not true. And I'll go back to the village scenario. It does take a village to raise a child and raise a family. And so what you're teaching that child from early days is that that child is surrounded by love. And all of us, we just want to know we're loved. But you're also teaching how to be self-sufficient, how to be independent. So as they grow up, they're used to tapping into other people to get their needs met. And that's okay. They don't have to be linked just to mom. Yes, mom will always be the primary, but it's understanding that you don't have to feel guilty because you're doing the best that you can do to provide that child an amazing life. So I share that because I hear so many women saying, how do I balance this, or how do I do it? And it can be done. It just requires you to get creative in how you go about it.
Amazing. I think it's a matter of, from what you both have said, it's a matter of setting the right boundaries. It's also a matter of having that community approach and trusting the people around you as well to kind of support you and to be there for you. Because sometimes I feel one of the things I've said about women is that sometimes you feel like you have to carry the whole world on your shoulder. And I feel that the key thing is that you knowing that there are people there who are not just going to help you carry your responsibilities, but they can actually carry you along in that as well, and be a great support system as well, and also being a great support system to each other. So that's really, really amazing. I really enjoy all the insight that you both have brought to the table today. So just to kind of round on things up here, so what would you say to that young lady or the woman out there who has a lot of dreams in her heart, but maybe does not have the right sponsor, or doesn't have the right mentor, or maybe she doesn't just know where to start from? What advice would you give to her on the best way to start and to go for her dreams?
I would say always be looking at how you learn. So looking at every opportunity as, a way to learn about yourself, to learn about, what's important to you. Because when you're learning, you're growing, right? And so that can help you, whether it's reading a book, whether it's, Googling something online, whether it's tapping into a person that who has had experiences, but it's always being curious and learning, because that will help you then figure out what you do want, you don't want, those kinds of things. And the other thing is it's feeling that fear and doing it anyway, right? Because fear and self-doubt is going to come up. Our society, the way that we're wired, it's always to put self-doubt on people, to help to encourage people to be fearful. And that takes a lot of courage to go inside and say, no, I'm, you know what, if I fail, I fail, but I'm going to learn. And that failure can become an opportunity. And when you can make that mindset shift, then you feel limitless, like you feel powerful, that, so what, if I fail, I'm going to learn from it. And so I'm going to do it anyway. And I think that those would be two of the things that I would say are most important, not worrying so much about what society is saying, or what even the people around you are saying, oh, you can't do that, or don't do that. Challenge that and show them that, oh yes, I can do it. And I'm meant to do it. I'm here for a purpose, and it's tapping into that purpose and sharing your gifts.
Amazing. Sophie, would you like to touch on that quickly?
I love that. I feel energized coming out of this. I feel like I've been coached. I suppose that the first thing for me would probably be to invest in that time to get to know yourself, get to know like you and your brand and what it is that energizes you, who you are, what your strengths are, what your blind spots are, and then own that, right? And be confident in it. I think we touched on this conversation around empathy earlier. Like, actually, women are known to be slightly more empathetic. I think it's something that we've told ourselves, or other people have told us in the future, that's not necessarily a trait of a successful leader. But actually, having worked in the tech industry now for some years, AI is replacing the stronger, the harder skills of leadership. AI cannot replace empathy. AI cannot replace that human element that is needed from the leaders that we need in our organizations today, right? So actually take the time, get to know what it is that drives you, what leadership means to you, the kind of leader you want to be, and own that and develop it and embrace it. That's probably number one. And then number two is just have the conversation, right? If there's somebody that you've seen is speaking at an event who inspires you, and you happen to have an opportunity to speak to that person, have the conversation. people love to speak about themselves, right? So ask them about themselves, ask them for those lessons, never shy away from that conversation, because you never know what opportunities or lessons that they will bring. So those would probably be my two.
Amazing, amazing. So guys, I really want to say a very big thank you. And so you guys, you've all heard it coming from Sophie and Vicky. Wherever you are, or whatever your situation is, or whatever your circumstance is, whatever you have in your heart to do, just go ahead and do it. Focus on how you learn. So be having that growth mindset. So challenging yourself to grow, challenging yourself to be better. Like Sophie said, when you're going for feedback, set the tone of the meeting. Focus on the things that you can be better at, not just getting validated for the things that you are already good at, but how you can improve yourself as a person, and start where you are. Even if you feel like you don't have those support system, just start where you are. And sometimes the negative surroundings that you may have, you could actually convert it into positivity, because one thing you're learning from the negative environment that you might be in is what not to do, right? So you know how not to treat people, you know how you wouldn't want somebody else to feel. So learn with that and run with that. And I guess what I would say to every man out there who has a woman in his life, either you're a father, you're a partner, or your brother, whatever, or your friend, whatever capacity you are playing in another woman's life, please always do your best to be a support system for them. Just as women have been, like they always say, behind every successful, or beside every successful man, is a very even more successful woman. Just as they've been a support system for us, we owe it to them to be a support system for them, because it takes the two of us working together in order for us to be successful together. So thank you both. Thank you, Vicky. Thank you, Sophie. And it's really a pleasure having you guys on the program. Until next time on the Startup, see you guys soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching today's episode of The Startups. It is my hope that has been both inspiring and insightful. Here at The Startups, we are committed to helping you to build successful and sustainable businesses that will provide the jobs for the future. This is why we are proud of our partnership with the Business Enablement Tool. It is a digital business consultant that helps you provide the ongoing support that you need to build a successful business. We're also committed to helping you to raise the capital that you need to actually take the first step to start your business. And that is why we are proud of our partnership with Transit Loan and the government-backed startup loan to help you to raise up to £25,000 in startup capital. For more information on this, please see the description below. To stay connected with us, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Please also hit the notification icon, the bell, so that you can always get notified once a new startup show comes out. Till next time, see you next week.